Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining this webinar where we're going to be talking all about Jira and more specifically the 5 critical Jira mistakes that you are making right now. Now I want to preface this by saying this isn't going to be like your typical, don't change status fields, don't delete work items, don't do this specific thing. These are things that I have found for myself when working with clients, when implementing Jira internally at grid.io. We use Jira for literally everything. These are the things that we have found are sort of the general concepts that we follow and general things that we tend to avoid whenever we implement Jira, we use Jira internally. So it's going to be the biggest 5 things that I use literally every single day, not only for implementation, but internally when I think about using Jira in general. And I really want to think back to the point when I started using and was kind of met with Jira first. I know a lot of you have like a similar experience and story where I first joined, I think I was like 17 years old, my first job, and it was in like a help desk type job and I was doing IT support. And I walked in, and the first thing that I saw was the Jira. Back then, it was like Jira Server. And as many of you would probably guess, I absolutely hated it. I did not like Jira. I was repulsed by it. I hated the UI. I hated how it was set up. I hated how complicated it was, and some of the things that it included with the requirements and restrictions that it had. So that's kind of what I'm trying to speak to today. Like the time that I was back then, I want these core 5 critical mistakes that I know now to kind of speak to myself back then and relay this information to past me. And kind of looking forward, the next job I got after that was sort of like a junior systems admin role. And I remember we were actually choosing a help desk software for the company that we had. It was around 100 people or so. And I remember Jira was an option, and I was like, no way. I would never choose Jira. Don't even like consider that. We got to look somewhere else. We ended up with going with Freshdesk at the time. And fast forward a couple of years later to my next job where I was the IT director. And I was kind of on the same boat, didn't like Jira, didn't know Jira, didn't understand Jira. And I was like, yeah, definitely not using that thing. It's horrible. It's not meant for like what we're trying to do. It's overly complex, all this. And we ended up going with Freshdesk once again. Fast forward a year into that job or so, the engineering team there was already using Jira. Some of the teams were using Confluence and some project management-y style things in Jira. And I kind of started to take another look at it because I sort of had to as the IT director. There's some problems that came up, and I just had to take a look at it, figure out some of the issues with it, fix some permissions, etc. And I remember just kind of slowly going through the realization of like, this is not what I thought it was. And over probably like a year or two in that role, I remember like kind of getting a very slow grasp of what Jira actually is. And it probably took me like 3-ish, 4-ish years to get a really good holistic understanding of, okay, this is what Jira actually is, and this is what it does, and this is why I hated it before. And these are the 5 things that like I wish I told myself back then that I didn't have to learn over that like 3-year period. And I wanted to cover all of these on this webinar. So if you're someone that is new to Jira, if you're like seasoned and have been using it for years, then this is probably going to speak to you in some way, because again, I literally did Jira administration for a living, and it took me years to figure out how to actually use Jira properly and not make some of these core simple mistakes that I made back then. So that's really the whole point of this webinar. Quick intros. My name is Josh. I'm the CEO and founder of grid.io. We've helped companies like KPI Solutions, Volkswagen, Trainual, PBS, a whole bunch of others implement and actually use Jira correctly. I'm going to throw it over to Luba to do a quick intro as well, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luba. I'm a customer success engineer, and I'm specializing on helping the customers to implement their backup strategy, because this is a very important topic.
Awesome.
I'm really lucky to be with you today. Thank you.
Now, before we dive into all of our points, which we'll do in just a second, we are recording. Everybody asks this every single time. So yes, we're recording this webinar. It will be sent to you after the webinar is over. So you'll get an email. You can share this recording, rewatch it, save it for later. Feel free to kind of do with it as you please. And a couple of participation items. All of you already found the chat from what it looks like. We don't have any polls today, so we won't be showing any of those. But if you do have questions at any point through the webinar, we'll do a small Q&A at the end. I'll do my best to answer every single one of those at the end. So just go to the questions tab, type in your question, hit submit. You could upvote questions that are relevant to you, and we'll answer them based on what has been upvoted. So if when we start going through these points, you have like specifics for your scenario and you want me to kind of give you some advice, give you some context information, my perspective on what to do in your particular scenario, happy to do that. Just hit the questions tab, drop in your question at any point through the webinar, and towards the end, we'll go over the full Q&A, and I'll try to answer every single question that comes in. Usually I'm able to get to all of them, and hopefully we'll be able to, depending on the amount of questions that come in. Awesome. So point number one, and this is going to sound a little bit controversial and a little bit, kind of out of the ordinary, but the first critical mistake that I see is that most teams try to use too many Jira features. And I'm going to give you a very specific example because I've seen this all over LinkedIn. I may even be guilty of doing this at some point, to be honest. But you've probably seen something along the lines of, if you use Jira for simple task tracking and don't do 100 different things and use every single possible feature, that's like using a Ferrari to pick up your groceries. And I've seen this a whole bunch. Like everyone says, oh, Jira is so powerful. You can do so much with it. There's so much you should be utilizing it. There's so many features that you're not using today that you should be using. And I actually don't like to think of it that way. And the reason I don't like that is because it infers that Jira needs to be complicated. And that is just simply not true. Jira does not need to be complicated. In fact, a lot of times when I've worked to implement Jira for companies and organizations, I remember doing a migration from Asana to Jira for a particular company, Kin Insurance. And it was like all of their marketing teams, their business teams, all that. And those, if you know marketing teams, they're very particular on the way that they work, the UI, the simplicity of the features and tools that they use. And we did the migration and got them into Jira. And the way that we implemented the Jira projects for them and the structure that we created was simpler than what they had in Asana. And all this to say that Jira doesn't need to be complicated. And there's a few things that I'll show in a demo really quickly that give you very specifics on how you should structure a Jira project depending on the team that you're in, which is I think what most people do wrong. But it does not need to be complicated. In fact, I always lean towards how simple can we make this? Simple is always better. Less is more. Simplicity beats complexity. And the reason I always lean into simplicity is for a few key reasons. Number one, things are just less prone to breaking. Like you're not going to be breaking a workflow that is to do in progress and done. Like that is a very hard workflow to break. Whereas if you have a lot of complex transitions, 20 to 30 statuses with validators, all that kind of stuff, and you make one small change, that could cascade and just break everything in the entire workflow. So the simpler something is, the harder it is to break it. And it just works. That's just kind of the bottom line. It typically just works. So number one, it's just easier to manage and it's harder to break. Number two, it actually gets more adoption from teams. You could imagine like jumping into a workflow that is, let's say like 20 statuses long, and I have to go through and like migrate every single card through every single column. That is just a pain to even think about. But if you have 3 statuses, to do in progress done, that makes me a lot more likely to go in there and actually use that process and system that someone built out for me. So we want to make things simple and as less complicated as possible. Now I'll share my screen and show you a very couple of specific examples that I like to use whenever creating new boards. And this really boils down to a couple of things, but I'll share creating your, let me share this screen, creating your project first, because I think this is where teams run into the first mistake. And if I show you exactly how to create this project, I'll walk you through which team should be creating which projects. And there is some variability here, but this is kind of the rule of thumb that I like to use whenever creating a new space. So I'll go to create new, and you'll be met immediately with like all of these templates, right? And you think like, if you're a marketing team, you go in here, HR go here, finance go here. I actually think this is a little bit misleading and a little bit too complicated to understand for most individuals. I even have a hard time understanding what all of these templates do. I actually just go down straight to the product and I'd click on one of the product options. And really, for the most part, I would say 99% of the time, you're going to be using either Jira or Jira Service Management. Now, if you're a service team, this is anybody who does customer support, IT support, HR. When you have a ticket coming into you and you need to resolve it or complete it, you're going to be looking at Jira Service Management. I always like to start out with a blank space because that's kind of the core basic building block, and you could pretty much do anything on top of that. That being said, you can kind of look through some of these and see if they'll resonate with you. You might just have to kind of strip some of these layers back after you implement it. With like IT service management, you might need to like remove some work types, remove some workflows that don't quite work for you, but it might be a good starting point. So basically, any service management team, go to service management and start with blank or specific template if you like. Every other team will start inside of Jira. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing and where I think teams make a lot of mistakes, because a lot of times we're told that this Kanban project type is more advanced and like gives you more flexibility, more features, more everything inside of Jira. Now, you should really only be using Kanban or Scrum if you're a development team. In all other cases, you should be starting with what is a blank space. And these are in the same product, but they are two vastly different things that you are set up completely differently on the back end. I'll show you exactly what they look like. But the point here is if you're a software team, you have two options, Kanban or Scrum. And this is if you do software development. If you run sprints, select Scrum. If you run no sprints, select Kanban. Everybody else, literally everybody else, should just be clicking blank space. So you're really left with 4 total options. Service management teams, go to blank space within Jira Service Management. Any kind of software teams, click on Scrum or Kanban, depending on your style of work. Everybody else, just click blank space. Now, some of these templates may be useful. They may be legitimately useful. I always personally start out with a blank space because it's a blank building block, blank slate that you can build on top of. If you're new to Jira, I actually do recommend starting with a template and just playing around with it, seeing how Jira is intended to be used, some of the building blocks there, and kind of working your way up to starting from scratch. So the reason I say do not select Kanban for any of the teams that are non-software teams is because of this. I'll show you 2 different examples of what these projects spaces look like. And they even filter differently. So we have different Jira business spaces and Jira software spaces. And each of these are entirely separate things. So I'll open each one of these up and show you a very specific example. So I'll pull up my software type project. And as you can see here, we have things like components, development, code. If I open up a work item, we have development fields, VS Code, code branches. And this can technically work for like a marketing team, but I do not recommend it because they don't need all of those features. And then you have things like swim lanes, separate boards. It's just more complexity, more things that you don't really need for a team that is not a software development team. And this is entirely different from a space like this. And this is very basic. This is very similar to like any project management tool that you would see out there. You literally have your Kanban board with your statuses. You could go to your list views. You could go to calendar views. You could go to timeline views. There's a whole bunch of options here that you can utilize for a marketing type team, for any kind of task management, project management, anything that you need to accomplish. Even if you're, say, an IT team, you might have a service management project for incoming tickets, but then a lot of times IT teams have like bigger projects that they're working on. And I always recommend using a separate board like this for general IT projects. So to manage like infrastructure refreshes, software licensing, any kind of bigger scope projects that might take more than a few weeks or even months, that can all live in boards in spaces like this. So that's kind of the biggest mistake I see whenever individuals start to use Jira, just because selecting the wrong project will immediately cascade you down the entirely wrong rabbit hole. And that's when we start to see a lot of that Jira hate, where it's like, oh, Jira's too complex. There's just too much involvement there. It's not quite what we were looking for. It's like too techie. And that's kind of the problem. It's just the wrong selection of the project types and spaces, partially due to like the complexity of like how many options there actually are. But those are the only options that you'll need moving forward. And I hope that kind of makes it really easy to select what next space you need to create and the next steps that you need to take to get any of your new teams into using Jira. So that is going to be our less is more simplicity. We want to make sure that, number one, we aren't using too many Jira features. And there are even things like adding validators, conditions, a whole bunch of statuses. Like there's so many things we could do in Jira that make it more complicated. That's what we want to avoid. That's literally what I want to avoid for you and your team, because that is what makes all of your team just hate using Jira. make it enjoyable, make it something that they almost look forward to on a Monday morning, right? Like I look forward to jumping into Jira, seeing what I have on the docket, seeing what I have to do, what I have to work towards. It makes it really easy for me when I can just jump in and do that and don't have to worry about the myriad of fields and information to fill out. So stop using too many Jira features. Start with simplicity and work your way up if you need to. So that's point number one. And kind of something I wish I knew back in the day, because before I would just kind of think, oh yeah, we need this and that, and like everything we could possibly do in every type of project, where just starting with simplicity is absolutely the best way to go, and expanding from there. So that was the demo. I already went over that. But point two is lacking creativity and experimentation. And there's a few very specific ways that you can do this. Some of the ways that I like to do this is with sandboxes. You don't actually have to have them. I'll show you how to use something as an alternative, but honestly, just break things, try things, test them out. I'll show you a very specific board that we use internally at grid.io. This is our content creation board. And it took us a year and a half to actually put this together in a way that works legitimately for us and our team. The only reason we were able to do that and to get to a point where this board works so well for us and for what we do is because we just tried it 10 different ways. I think we made like hundreds of micro adjustments with like fields and variations of statuses and flows. I think there's been over like 10 major revamps of something like this, where we literally like reworked all the statuses, the way it works, the work types. Like there's been a lot we did to actually make this work. The only way that that was possible is we just tried to break things and try as many things as we possibly could. We did do this in a sandbox, and literally to set up a sandbox, it's as simple as going to your settings on the top right. I like to go to user management. That's kind of the fastest way to get there. But then you could click on your apps, you click on sandboxes, and you just click create first sandbox. Or if you already have one, you could click on that one and access it. Now, what's really cool about the sandbox is that you can create it and then copy your production data, whatever's in your Jira environment now, to the sandbox. And now you have like a perfect replica that you could just go in and just break everything, right? You could go in and test a bunch of new stuff, try a bunch of new things. And that's exactly what we did with our content creation board. I just went in there and I tried like 3 different variations of how we would actually implement something. And then I tried using it for like a kind of a mock experience in a live production environment, like how I'd walk through a piece of content. Eventually, we landed on something that actually worked for us. And by doing this, we tried like a whole bunch of different variations, and we ended up at a place where we actually found a solution that we liked to use. And that was very, very big for us, because it was, we kind of had a solution before. It wasn't quite there. It was like, it was usable. We didn't love it. We didn't enjoy using it. We didn't really look at that board because we just kind of were repulsed by it. And that to say, like, there are probably 100 different ways you could do something in Jira because of the customization and flexibility. It's really a matter of, let's find the specific version, the way, the implementation that works best for you and your team. Like this setup that we have might not work for you and your team very well, but it works for us very, very well based on like how we run our content and our team. So there's a lot of different ways that you can tweak, modify, and change things. And I just encourage you to go in, create a sandbox, copy production data, and just break everything you can. And this works exceptionally well when you're running a new implementation. And I say this because you don't really have anything yet. Like there is no production data. So literally set up a sandbox and just start with a couple different variations of how you want to implement something. Literally just start throwing stuff in there, give it a couple of tests, have your team jump in, have them test it out, have them give you feedback. And from there, you can make better decisions on what is actually going to work best for us. That's why I love to use sandboxes so much. Now, sandboxes are only available for premium Jira customers. You don't technically have to have them, though. The really big thing that you'll be missing with the sandbox is the ability to copy production data into the sandbox. But my recommendation is, if you don't have premium, literally go in and just create a new space that is the same one that you're using and experiment with that. Now, you can't create a whole bunch of test data in there for like, you can create test data, but you can't copy the test data. But you can absolutely still go in, add in backend functionality, test things out, still break things in the context of that space. I actually like to use this in a team managed project sometimes, which is, don't tell anyone. We're not supposed to use team managed spaces as Jira admins, but I like to use them for testing every once in a while. That way we don't create a bunch of backend bloat with like fields and work types. But it does give you the opportunity to just create something and test it out, break it, wipe the space clean, and you're done. There's no trace of it left. And then you could now implement that new findings that you have from that space that you've kind of played around with into a production environment. So you do not need a sandbox environment. You don't need to pay for Jira Premium necessarily. It does make it more convenient, and it does help with the production data copy, but it is not necessary. And again, I just encourage you to jump in, break things, test them out, try different variations of what you're implementing and how you're implementing them, and then see what works best. This is actually something we do with our clients every single time we engage with a new organization. So whenever we go to implement Jira, we have what is called our Jira strategy. And during that process, we build POCs to actually test out. And we give several variations of those POCs to see what'll kind of work best. So we'll kind of go in and get an idea, a really good lay of the land of like, how is the work being done now? What is the goal we're trying to accomplish? And now let's build a couple of POCs that could work really well for this particular environment. And then we'll just test them out. We'll have users jump in. We'll see what's more intuitive. We'll probably even make a couple of revisions. And without that part of it, we would never be able to come to a really, really good implementation with the clients that we work with. So I highly encourage you to just break things as much as you can, test them out, because there's so many different variations of how you could do any given thing within Jira. So that's point number 2. Don't lack creativity. Try to just test out and break things as much as you can. Now, point number 3, Luba, I'll be bringing you into this one, but point number 3 is not backing up Jira. I will give a little bit of context here, but let me first ask the question of why should I back up data in the first place? And doesn't Atlassian handle that? Like, why does it matter to me? Luba, I'll kind of kick it over to you to help answer that.
Okay, let me start with probably what you already see in yourself. You see that when Jira data is messed up, team always lose the coordination. The incidents tend to take longer, and releases slips, and support can track the work. So, and most importantly, the teams and leadership lose visibility. And if we think about the real business perspective, I think this is real money, all this mess.
Yeah.
And I think you'll agree with me that the most incidents are not the dramatic cyber attacks.
True.
They're, like a small everyday actions, and the business outcome actually always the same. The time lost, the rework, the arguments about what truth is.
True. So what are the moments where like a backup is actually going to help me and myself? Like I know some of these items, but walk me through like the biggest reasons why a backup matters in the first place.
I would say this is probably most like everyday actions, the small deletion, wrong communication, something like that. As I already mentioned, not the cyber attacks that we face every day, but small actions. And probably I can just tell you a story that I heard from one of our customers. The experienced users, and they were preparing like a Jira product discovery review right before the meeting. So it was kind of time pressure. So they wanted to adjust a filter, and they thought they removed the field from a filter, but in a hurry and without the careful reading the confirmation messages. They actually removed the field from the whole space. So in just one moment, these advanced Jira users deleted the entire view for the roadmap, and it became simply useless.
Yeah,
So such things.
I remember moments like that for myself when I was like back in the day starting out in Jira doing migrations and had some like overlap with migration data. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just delete these. And I accidentally deleted some critical information. We were thankfully able to like recover it, but it was a pain to recover it. Having some kind of a backup solution that mitigates those little things would be ideal for sure.
You also probably meet a lot of these Atlassian community posts with these questions like, we accidentally deleted release tickets. Can we restore them? So do you know the answer?
Yeah, I mean, you can't delete or restore deleted tickets in Jira, and that I think a lot of people don't know that until it's too late. They delete the ticket, and then it's like, oh wait, we needed that. And at that point it's too late. There's literally no way to recover it, which is a little bit of an oversight. And I think Atlassian and Jira have done better, but it still is, there's no way to recover a ticket. But at least they prompt you a little bit more now. But having that backup would definitely be more ideal.
Yeah, and actually, it's not only the Jira problem. So right now we're discussing something like the day-to-day action that lead to the problems, and without recoverability, we can't actually solve them. But the Jira belongs to the big ecosystem, like DevOps ecosystem, and I don't want to scare you with a long list of threats like malwares, ransomwares, natural disasters, but let me mention just quick stories instead. And as you probably all heard the news this week about the Middle East and the internet were with all this report that the AWS had outages in Middle East after data center sites were hit and power had to be shut down, and some services in that region became unstable. And that's the point. Cloud is not a magic.
Yeah.
It's still buildings.
It feels like
power.
magic.
Yeah, but it's still buildings, still power, still cables, and real world events. And when it happens, your team actually doesn't care why it happened. They just feel it like we can't work.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Like when something, even like a partial outage where you just can't get into Jira for a couple hours and maybe you have a meeting or something coming up where you need that critical data, like your boss, your team, they don't care that it's down. They just need the data. And if you can't get to it, there's just no way around it without a backup solution.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention the AI topic because, this is a hot topic right now, and most of the teams, it's something new for them. And you also probably saw a lot of public stories where AI coding agent deleted a live database during normal work. And I'd like to picture this in Jira. Let's imagine it's Friday, 4 p.m. Someone asked the AI helper to clean up all stuff, and the prompt is vague and permissions are wide, and AI moves fast. And you don't notice it right away. Maybe on Monday morning, you'll find yourself rebuilding history from memory. So
no, very true. That's a very, very big risk, even some that we don't like typically see. So now that we know we should back up data for not only like internal users, and a lot of people in the chat are saying like we lock this down for our team, like they can't actually delete tickets, which is really good. I've met so many teams that don't do that. And there's always kind of a reason you do need to delete. So even the admins can slip up sometimes. But generally speaking, user mistakes, but also outages, downtime, things that we just might not expect from the cloud can come up. So like we know we need to run backups, but what is the easiest way to get started? And I'll preface this with saying like we can back up data within Jira directly, like you can run a full export or export work items, but those things are all manual and they're very, very hard to bring back into Jira or like pull context out of. So what other alternative can we work with that actually makes that process easier?
You already mentioned this built-in backup solution. Probably I need just to add here that probably also know that Atlassian deprecate the API from this built-in backup manager. So if you already have some kind of solution based on this backup manager API, probably you need to check it again because it's going to it's sunset at the end of the March this year, so it's pretty close. Also, if you're at premium or at enterprise plans, Jira, you can also try the option of the newest release of backup solution, but also you need to take into account a lot of limitations. You can also explore the documentation and see if it actually works for you. But my preference, actually, this is the Git Protect. Let me try to share my screen.
We can see it.
My screen. Yep. This is the Git Protect login screen. Let me just log in and quickly show you. It's not quickly, but we can discuss something during my login.
I'll throw up the link on the screen. So all you literally have to do, because this is a Jira app, you click the link and it takes you to Git Protect. This actually allows you to install it directly in Jira. So there's no like API handling and all that. You pretty much just go to the link, you install it, and then you get to this screen here that Luba is showing.
Yeah, that's easy as pie to install the Git Protect application from Atlassian Marketplace. And it's easy as pie to integrate your Jira site with the Git Protect. So I did it previously, so I'm just going to show you the amazing thing that Git Protect allows you to do. This is a granular backup. When you integrated all your Jira instance already in Git Protect, you can assign a plan. Plan means simply the policy you assign to your critical data and run on. So right now I'm going to create the granular backup plan for most important spaces I have in my Jira. They're a legal one.
So this is like the critical things that you would want to back up in very specific scenarios.
Yeah, so basically my recommendation, first think about what is the most critical data for you in Jira. Then create specific policies that actually meet the RTO and RPO. And if we are talking about RTO and RPO, this is a recovery point objective. It simply means how much data you can afford to lose. So for example, if you work for 1 hour and you can't afford to lose this data, your backup should run every hour. And RTO, means how fast you need to be back online, for example. And of course, if you know the Jira related to the API, and restoration process also can take time. So you can consider these two basic, very important characteristics. So right now, I'd like to protect my Jira, and Git Protect allows me to protect the whole space, for example, or select the project or set the rules. This is the most important, because if you have the large Jira, it's probably much better to implement regular expressions. I'm going to select my project, and as I said, I'm interested in legal one. So I'm looking for them, and I'm going to protect them. And that's it. I'm applying. And next, this is the next level of granularity, because I'm protecting only what's important for me. And next, I need to select the data, what actually needs for me for protection of this particular project. So right now, I can select if I'd like to back up the users in group. And of course, right now, I don't need them. And in terms of the projects, I selected the project, but it's up to me to decide if I want to back up the notification schemes, or for example, if I don't use versions or something is not important for me, I can also exclude from the backup. And most important, the issues. I can select which exactly I'd like to stay here. For example, attachments, I don't need them. Probably I won't back up them. And last but not least, it's really important if you have the Jira Service Management, it's easy to back up the Atlassian assets. And what is most important, if you're going to restore the Atlassian assets, it will be restored with the original IDs. This is something that even Atlassian was in shock that we implemented this. So it's really important, because you know about all these connections inside the assets among the schemes.
So to get a kind of high-level overview, basically, if information is deleted, we can back up full site or granular projects. But then recovery, that's kind of where the real magic happens, and we can literally recover everything that was there in its original way with the original issue IDs, and kind of put it back as if nothing ever happened.
And moreover, you can recover to original Jira site or completely new Jira site, or even save the data locally. It's really important. It's not provided by the Atlassian. Only the new site is supported on Atlassian backup solution. So awesome. Would you like me to continue and just mention two?
Can you show? I would love to see like a recovery, how that process would look. I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Okay, just to mention the storage. Storage is really important things, and the schedule. This is probably the most important, because I told you about the RPO and RTO. So I have a full copy, for example, and the incremental. I can set it hourly and set it every hour. This way, how we achieve the RTO. So it's up to you how often you'd like to run your backup, just to be sure that all the data is completely safe. So right now, I have the plan. It's going to run on scheduler. But for your convenience, let me show quickly the restoration process. I did it previously and I have the restoration points. And in terms of restore, as I already mentioned, you can restore to original Jira organization or to the new organization or even to the device. And if I restore to a new organization, I can select what exactly I'd like to restore. I right now interested in the whole project. I'll be waiting to think with the information and tell a little bit more about the storage. With Git Protect, you have the included unlimited cloud storage. It's really good to have because you know your own storage. It's good for the control, but it also means money. So having this one with Git Protect is also good. So I'm going to restore my data. Interface shows me exactly what will be restored. I select the site. I call it restored, whereas specific. And here I have the options to assign some project mappings, or for example, restore the automation rules, and even restore the rules owner and something like that. So if I press the restore, the restoration will start. That's how easy you can set up your first backup. So just install the application and try yourself. Reach out to me if you have any questions.
Yeah,
I believe that's all. Maybe you have any questions at this point.
Yeah, there's a few. I want to cover them at the end. I'll cover the other 2 points really quick, but I like the idea of you can back up any amount of granularity, restore to multiple places like a new space or original source. That makes it like so easy that you pretty much don't really have much work to do. Run the automated backup, and whenever you need it, it's just there, and you can go in there and within minutes just restore that information. So super helpful. Thank you, Luba. We'll go over those questions in just a couple of minutes because there were a few coming in. All right, so point 4, over documentation. So this is a big one, and I know a lot of people love to document a lot of their processes, create SOPs, create guides on like how to actually do something. But one thing that I've found is when we create an SOP, especially like internally here at grid.io, we tend to like just not end up using them very often unless we absolutely have to. So my approach for this is actually a little bit different. And essentially documenting everything is technically unproductive because you're not going to use a lot of the documentation that you have. So I have a slightly different solution for this, and that is to build SOPs into your current processes. And I'll show you exactly what this looks like and how we like to do it. But the idea here is that, number one, don't document absolutely everything. Don't SOP absolutely everything because it's probably not going to get used. And then number two is, if you can, try to include that within your Jira processes directly. So a very specific example of that, I'll share exactly what that looks like and how we do it at grid.io. And let's see, I'll pull up my content creation board because that is the one we tend to use more often. And in here, what we do is we literally just add an SOP kind of checklist style process, but also restrict a few things that help us to kind of work that process into Jira directly. So rather than saying have a doc in Confluence says step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, what we do is we restrict transitions on the next step. So like literally we go from raw concepts. The only option is packaging because we have to package before we go into scripting. We have to script before we go into production. We have to do the recording and content before post-production. So this actually allows us to put some rigidity into the process. And there's a couple of key things that we pull into these work items that allow us to kind of document the SOP within them. So this is one specific example where I actually had this literal description and outline in a Confluence doc. And my assumption was, hey, we put this in a Confluence doc with an SOP. Someone will go in, copy this template, pull it into a new document, link it to this work item, and then we'll be able to fill it out. We could bounce between the two, make it really easy. That adds so much more friction to a process that didn't need it. So I literally just took what I was doing in Confluence and I was like, let's just throw this into the Jira ticket directly. And if you didn't know, Jira allows you to have rich text within the description field and really any other field that's a paragraph text you want. I use this all the time and I love using this because it's kind of like having a mini Confluence document directly inside of Jira. And it's super duper handy because I don't actually necessarily need to bounce between the two if I don't have to. So that's kind of step one. Take what you can to give the templates, the context, the information directly in the work item. That way someone doesn't have to like reference an entirely different document every time they do something. They would literally go in here in our case and create a new raw concept for a video. We would pull that into packaging. We have this information preloaded here with an automation, and then we go in and we start to fill this out. And before we go into the concept locked or like the scripting phase, this would already be filled out. So we took something that was overly complex and like had multiple areas to reference it and just put it in one place. Step 2 is we actually added checklists. So every step of this process includes new checklist items. And we have subtasks available here, so like child work items. The reason we like checklists is that our child work items are actually our content, in this case, repurposed content. So like shorts, long form or short form videos, any kind of written posts, text posts. And we can't put in like create 3 title variations, finalize the angle. That wouldn't really work in this case because of how we're running this particular flow. So we actually build that into a checklist app, and literally every single time we move to a new column, we generate a new checklist set of items. So you can see in here, the 3 title variations and thumbnails are done. Now we have to finalize the angle and finalize the script to this format. Those were generated in the next step. So literally as we're walking through this workflow, we're generating new checklist items that are like, okay, here's what needs to happen next. Here's what should happen as of right now. And rather than looking at like a document that says, okay, here's step 1 through 100, and like referencing it there and like trying to map that back into Jira, making sure you're following it, we just build that right into Jira. And that's what I try to kind of teach moving forward, because I just found that people don't like to follow a process that's somewhere else that they have to reference and try to remember. Just build it in here where they can immediately see it and check things off as they go, where they can add their context in as quickly and simply as possible. So that's what I encourage now moving forward, and what made even my life so much easier. Like I kind of didn't like the whole SOP idea unless it was something very, very highly specific. And to be completely transparent, like we do write SOPs for specific things, but as much as we possibly can, I like to include this directly inside of Jira. I'm using a checklist app from Power Tools for Jira, whole bunch out there. This Power Tools for Jira app lets me do kind of several things. So I like to use it for this particular reason, and we could just run automations to create a checklist item. But it makes it easier for us to just say, okay, all the checklist related things for us mean an SOP process. Anything that is a child work item or like a subtask is still an action item that can also have their own checklist items. But we kind of relate checklist to SOP in Jira, and that's sort of how we use it and how we define our checklists within our work items. So I would encourage you, do what you can to build your process into Jira or whatever tool you're using. And you can much easier kind of get people to follow that process. And it's also a little bit easier than actually writing out a fully detailed and really nicely looking SOP. So I like to do it this way, but we still do use SOPs on occasion. All right, so that's point number 4. We want to make sure that we're not over documenting and not creating SOPs for literally everything, and trying to just build that directly into Jira. Last point before we go into Q&A, point number 5 is avoiding the Atlassian ecosystem. This I see happening a little bit less often, but I do see it happening every once in a while. But really the whole goal here is like use the apps that you have available to you. Jira is very powerful, but when you pair it with Confluence, if you include assets in that, if you start using Loom, like there's so much you could do, and there's so much power that these tools allow you to have, that it makes it so nice and convenient to use all of them. I'll give you a very specific example, and that is between like Confluence and Jira. So I could literally go in here into any work item, and I'll pull up, let's say, this story, and I'll go into, I'll actually open up a Confluence doc as well, and I'll literally just copy over whatever Confluence doc I could find first to make it simple. That's Selena space. So let me go to a document. There we go. And I'll go back to my work item. And in here, I'm literally just going to paste in a Confluence document. And you already see that there's a Loom in here, but that is a kind of another example of an integration. But if I paste a Confluence doc, I can then click the link and I can add in an embedded view. And now immediately, if I save this, I can literally go in and see this Confluence document directly in my Jira description. And this just allows me to make it so much easier than kind of like bouncing between the tools. I could quickly reference information and see information here. But what's even cooler is I could copy this whole Jira ticket, go over to Confluence and edit this page. And I could paste the Jira ticket into here. I'll add a little divider. And now we get an embedded view of Jira directly in Confluence. So it works both ways, which is super duper cool. And if I update this, now if I'm like creating this document for whatever purpose it is, project management, we're doing something with these work items, I could literally just jump in here. I could start making changes within this work item, and I never have to leave Confluence. Like these tools are so well integrated and powerful. And when we use only one of them, it's kind of like leaving a lot of the functionality of what you wish Jira would have natively. And Confluence is like the perfect pairing here for documentation, for knowledge articles, SOPs. It's also phenomenal to integrate Loom, assets, Jira service management. And one thing I'm a big proponent of is actually just running every single team and department in your company inside of Atlassian. That's what we do internally at grid.io. It's a lot of what we do with our clients. We actually recommend as much as we can. Like if you can pull your teams from Asana, from Smartsheets, from Freshdesk, Freshservice, let's just get them all into Jira. You have one place of source of truth. You have an easy way of reporting on all of that data. It makes it so much easier for like everyone to actually jump in, use one tool, and know that everything lives in one single place. So using the Atlassian ecosystem is kind of the fifth mistake that I see. And again, a lot of teams use Jira and Confluence, but have you tried using assets? Have you tried using Loom, Jira Service Management, all the other products, Bitbucket? There's a lot of them out there that do a lot of in-depth things. And one step deeper is actually using the marketplace apps. And these are sort of extensions of Jira, but I almost think of them as mini environments or like apps inside of Jira directly. So if you think of rich filters, right? This is actually a really good alternative to like a Power BI or any other reporting tools. Like you can literally get, if you're using Jira for your whole company, all the reporting you could need out of this one app that is very, very cheap and affordable. Then there's Tempo. You could get all of your time tracking done within a single app. So you don't need a third-party time tracking tool. It integrates vertically here. It can do all of your capacity planning as well. It could do all of your financial tracking. So it has like these kind of like mini, what do you call them? Mini, like these apps create little other whole areas of Jira that weren't possible before that now kind of give you the opportunity to expand into those areas where you would have an entirely separate app otherwise. Power Tools is another great example. It gives you things like checklists, reminders, things like the things that you don't typically get outside of Jira, but just kind of help you move forward. So look into using all of the Atlassian ecosystem, but also look as much as you can into the third-party extensions to see if those can potentially replace apps that you'd be using on a daily basis. So super cool. Someone's mentioning Jotform in Jira. Like you can create a Jira service management form or a work management form and use that. Like there are alternatives. There, like obviously Jotform has some features that Jira won't. But in a lot of cases, for very simple use cases, you can replace tools that are out there, expensive that you're using with native functionality in Jira. There's even form plugins in Jira that do a fantastic job of being like type form or fill out form or jot form alternatives. So definitely something to look at and consider. Now, I already kind of covered the live demo, but we're going to be going into Q&A in just a minute here. As we start to kind of get to the end here, we'll try to answer all of the questions that we had, but putting this all together, simple 5 steps from these 5 points. Number 1 is do not overcomplicate Jira. Keep it simple as you can. Number 2 is be more creative and just try new things, break new things. Number 3 is just back up your data, use some form of backup at the very least. Git Protect is a phenomenal option, but at least back up your data in some way. Number 4, build SOPs into your processes directly as much as you can. Number 5 is use all of the Atlassian apps and the ecosystem built into it. That's kind of putting all this together. This is, again, what I wish I would have known 5-10 years ago, and I was just starting out and using Jira and didn't really like it. And sort of the core concepts that I carry with me to this day that I use whenever I work with our clients, whenever we implement things internally. And that's our 5 big things that we always look out for. Now, this can sound pretty daunting. You might not know where to start, right? Like, how do I create an SOP for a process that we have and build it into Jira? How do we back up our data in a good way that backups only the critical information, runs once an hour? How do we integrate third-party apps into our tool set with Jira? How do we replace them with tools that we have? And I want to give it a specific example of Kin Insurance, which is a company we worked with not long ago. And kind of walking through all of these 5 points, we moved them from Asana to Jira, and we took that opportunity to remove the friction from as much of their processes as we could. We tested in a variety of different ways. Pretty much everything we built for them had multiple versions and variations that we tested in Sandboxes and then pulled into production. We backed up all their data on autopilot. We integrated all of their process steps into the work that they did with all of their teams. And we used pretty much every single Atlassian app. They used Confluence, Jira, Loom, several third-party applications, and a whole bunch more. So it is very much possible. We moved them from Asana to Jira, and they loved Jira more than Asana, and a bunch of them were marketing teams. And again, we know how particular they can be and how like specific they could be about their tool sets. So it is 100% possible and feasible. As we start to jump into questions, if you want help fixing any of this or any of these points kind of spoke to you, I would love to work with you. My team would love to work with you. We're going to throw up a quick QR code on the screen. We're going to have 10 strategy session slots available for this webinar. All you have to do is scan the QR code, or you can click the link, and that will take you to a form. You fill out the form, you grab a time to meet with me, and we will walk over any of those 5 items that we just covered and try to figure out how we can make Jira and Atlassian better for you. So it's all you have to do, and we'll dive into questions now. I'll leave the QR code up there for anyone who wants to scan it. Let me know if you want the link shown up again if anybody missed it in the meantime. All right, so any pros or cons of using rich text templates in a new work item versus using a custom form for specific work items? I assume the former provides more flexibility and reduces the number of work items. Just need to copy and paste. From a Confluence doc. So if you're copying and pasting from a Confluence doc, I like to use rich text template in new work item versus using a form. I like to use, depends on what you're doing. On creation, you'll want to use a form if you can. I like to keep things as simple as possible on creation, so I actually don't require any fields on creation. This isn't possible for service management projects in particular. It is possible with any kind of work management project. So I try to avoid using a form on the front end and pulling in that context and information as work flows through the workflow. That way you're not like jumping in and it's like daunting to just look at it immediately, if that makes sense. So I'm going to try to run through these questions as quickly as I can because there's a few of them. About Git Protect, does it also back up any add-on workflows, conditions, or any code added, for example, script runner, or I guess any third-party apps? Luba, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, it's already in the roadmap. Not for now, but already in the roadmap, the script runner for sure. And also we're considering the X-ray as well. And any else you have, you mentioned the EasyBI and Tempo. So it's good to know that you're interested in this data. So we'll be happy to add it to our roadmap. So let's get in touch.
Coming soon, sounds like, right?
Correct.
Awesome. Great to hear. All right. A couple more questions here. Have you tested Git backup approach on large scale instances? I really like the idea. I'm assuming I know this, but Luba, I'll defer to you.
Basically, you can also try it yourself if you have the large Jira instance, but the granular backup was specifically released for achieving this approach. So you can just try it out.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks for that answer. All right. A couple more questions here. I'll try to get through the ones that are upvoted the most. 3 years ago, Atlassian engineers did something that caused a significant number of their customers to lose their entire cloud tenants. I do remember this. We had nothing for nearly 6 weeks. Wow, that's a long time. No backup would have helped. Is there a way to back up an entire tenant, not just data? I'll kick this over to you, Luba, but I do know that the reason the backup solutions work with Git Protect so well is that they back up on entirely different servers. And you would still have access to all that data and be able to pull it in. Luba, I'll defer to you on that. Make sure I'm saying things correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, because as I already mentioned, you have to have your own strategy. Basically, you need to design what you exactly need in the worst case. I believe that particular case is the worst case that happened, and how fast you need to be recovered. And of course, you need to test it properly, because just having backups, it's not enough. You need, of course, to test it.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Last question. What is the 15-minute phone call. I could use all the help, but our company doesn't want to spend the funds. If you don't have the funds or can't access or like can't work with us, totally fine. We actually have a school community, completely free. You could join, ask questions. Selena, if you could throw that in the chat, actually, that'd be great. And yeah, if anybody wants to check that out, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if you wanted to grab time and work with us, we're happy to kind of see how that would work. I'll throw up the link one more time. Just click the link, you book a session with myself, and we'll walk over with you exactly how to help make Jira better and sort of covering those 5 points. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. So happy to have run this webinar. Thank you, Luba, for joining us. I know I wasn't quite able to get to all of them. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn after, if anything, and ask questions there, or on the school community. You could join that and feel free to ask your questions there, if anything. Thank you, Arslan. Appreciate you throwing that out there. You could join that community, ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer them there. And thank you all for joining.